The bus hissed as it came to a stop at the edge of Hollow's Bend, a small Midwestern town that looked more like a postcard trapped in the wrong century. Rows of leaning wooden houses lined the cracked main road, their porches sagging with the weight of decades. The gas station, the only one for miles, blinked with a failing neon sign, open 24 hours, though the town itself felt asleep, smothered in silence. Elena Carter stepped off the bus, suitcase in one hand, notebook in the other. She had chased stories before, but not like this one. This assignment wasn't about politics or scandals or small-town festivals. It was about a ghost. The woman in the white dress. Whispers about her had lingered in American folklore for over a century, passed down through local tailies, but Hollow's Bend claimed ownership. Sightings near the old bridge, always at night, always when the fog was thickest. Some said she wandered the road searching for her groom. Others claimed she lured strangers to their deaths. Elena didn't believe in ghosts, not really, but she believed in fear. Fear was a story, and stories sold. The motel clerk, a sunken-eyed man in his 60s, barely looked at her as she signed in. "You're not here for the story, are you?" he asked flatly. Elena paused, caught off guard. "What story?" The man's lips twitched, but he didn't smile. "You'll find out." They always do. The way he slid the room key across the counter felt less like service and more like a warning. When Elena entered her room, the air smelled faintly of mildew, the wallpaper peeling at the corners. She set down her bag and opened her notebook, jotting her first impressions. But before she could write a word, a sharp bang shook the thin glass window. Heart racing, she pulled the curtain aside. Nothing except a bird, broken and twitching, at the base of the window. Beyond it, at the tree line, she thought she saw movement. A figure, a dress white against the dark. She blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, Elena walked the town, speaking with locals under the guise of a travel feature. Some laughed nervously when she brought up the woman in white. Others crossed themselves or simply turned away. An elderly woman on her porch leaned closer, her voice a rasp. "She's not a ghost. She's a punishment. Everyone here carries guilt, miss, and she feeds on it. The more you run from what you've done, the closer she comes." Elena wrote it down, though her pen trembled. Not because she believed the woman, but because she felt the creeping sting of memory, the crash, the water, her sister's last breath. She shoved the thought away. At dusk, she drove to the bridge. Rusted rails arched over still black water, the fog thickening like breath on glass. She took photos, recorded ambient sounds, and tried to laugh at her own nerves. Yet every snap of a twig behind her, every ripple in the water below, made her heart stutter. Then came the cold, a sudden chill, sharp enough to sting her lungs. Her recorder, left on the bridge railing, crackled. At first, it was faint a low hum, then whispers. Dozens of them overlapping, weaving into words. "You should have saved me." Elena froze. When she replayed the tape seconds later, the bridge was silent again. But the words were still there, clear, accusatory. Driving back to the motel, headlights cutting through the mist, Elena gripped the wheel too tightly. She told herself it was folklore, paranoia, suggestion, nothing more. But as she parked and cooled the engine, she saw it again. Across the street, under the flickering motel sign, stood a woman in a long white dress, head bowed, still as stone. Elena blinked, and she was gone. Only the sign buzzed in the silence, flickering between open 24 hours and OPE 24 as if the night itself was breaking. The motel room breathed with the damp of old carpet and unwashed curtains. Elena left the lamp on, not for comfort, but for the notes spreading across the bed. Fragments of interviews, a hand-drawn map of Hollow's Bend, a list of names to call in the morning. She pressed her recorder to her ear, replaying the sound from the bridge. "You should have saved me." The words lived in the static, like a bruise beneath the skin of the night. She rewound again, heard the same wet consonants, the same fraying edge of a voice, as though it had been dragged through water too long. She didn't write down the sentence. To write it would be to admit it existed. Outside, a distant truck moaned along the highway and faded into the dark. The neon sign sputtered through the curtain. OP24 Who? Elena turned off the lamp and lay back. She told herself to observe, not to feel, to catalog, not to believe. That had always been her line of defense, even after the accident. Sleep rose up in tides. She was back in the car with her sister. It was late summer, cicadas buzzing, heat lifting off the asphalt in tremors. The river flashed through the trees. Elena's hands were on the wheel. Her sister's laughter caught on something sharp and turned to a scream. Then the guardrail wasn't a guard at all, more like tinfoil, more like nothing. The nose of the car dipped. Gravity tilted sideways. Water cracked the glass. It poured in with terrible orderliness, slow and inevitable, as if the river had been rehearsing this moment forever. Her sister clawed at the seatbelt. Elena's fingers slipped. The car rolled and the roof became the floor. The world inverted with the logic of a nightmare. Her sister's face floated inches from hers, pale in the green dark. Bubbles stitched a necklace up her throat. "You should have saved me." Elena's mouth opened. The river came in. She woke with a choke and a flood of cold air she didn't remember letting into the room. The curtain billowed softly. For a moment, she thought the neon sign had finally gone silent, but it was only that the light had moved, drawn up by a second glow like another moon. The second glow was a face. It pressed against the outside of the window, nose flattened, cheeks slick, eyes open and blind white, a skull smile stretched in reverent curiosity. Though Elena's room was on the second floor, the face hovered at her eye level, as if the air itself held it there. A veil clung to the glass like algae. Water slid down in patient threads. Elena didn't scream. She couldn't. The face tilted the way a predator wonders if prey can see in the dark. And then it was gone, so quickly the curtain still swayed from a presence no longer there. Her breath came in broken pieces. She stared at the window until the neon stuttered back into place. And then she forced her legs toward the curtain, forced herself to look, to rationalize someone on a ladder, a reflection, a dream nested inside another dream. Below, the motel lot was empty except for her car and the clerk's pickup. The breeze tugged at the lace of an abandoned plastic shopping bag in the chain-link fence. No ladder, no footprints, no sign. Elena locked the window and the door and sat awake until the sky went gray. Morning was a thin coffee brewed in a stained pot and a slice of bread confessed as toast by the diner across the street. Elena took the corner booth where she could see both the road and the kitchen pass through. She needed ordinary things, clatter, gossip, eggs, to sand down the edges of the night. The diner complied, plating noise and grease in equal portions. She recognized the waitress from the motel vending machine the night before. A woman about Elena's age with a thumb-shaped burn scar on her wrist. The namatag read Lucy. "You from out of town?" Lucy asked, topping off the cup without being asked. "Passing through. Doing a piece on small towns for American life," Elena lied. Half lied. The magazine was real. The assignment loose enough to accommodate a ghost if a ghost refused to be ignored. Lucy cocked her head. "You ask about the bridge yet?" "Should I?" Lucy's mouth twitched, not a smile. More like a muscle remembering an instruction. Folks say a lot. Depends who you ask and how much they had to drink. "Then I'll ask you now and buy you a drink later," Elena said, trying lightness she didn't feel. Lucy glanced at the clock. "I get off at 3. There's a bar next to the laundromat." The one with the jukebox that never works. Ask for Henderson if you want official stories. He's sheriff, part-time historian, full-time pain. Noted. Elena slid a card across the table. If you think of anything, or if you see anything. Lucy didn't touch the card. I don't look. That's the trick, she said softly. You don't look long enough, and she goes find someone else. She? Lucy poured more coffee into a cup that didn't need it. People come through wanting to see the dress, she went on, voice lower. They stand on the bridge until the fog climbs their legs. They think they're safe if they hold hands. They think they're safe if they say each other's names. They're not. The river knows a name's just another way to drown. Elena's recorder rested near the sugar caddy, its little red eye unblinking. She didn't press record. The diner's grease and chatter made Lucy's words too intimate, like a confession whispered in a church for the wrong prayer. The contradictions weren't noise. They were proof of something shaped by need. Elena had learned this in other towns, other stories. A legend is a mirror people hold up to themselves. What do you fear? It asks. What did you do? In the library, Mark, the historian Lucy had mentioned, guided her to a microfilm machine with the authority of a curator, showing her where he kept his ghosts. Everyone wants the 1911 papers, he said, rolling the crank to a date that made the past squint into the present. They never want what came before. What came before? Elena asked. Mark's lips tugged, not unkindly. The part where the town invents itself over other people's bones. On the screen, announcements, grainy faces of people who must have thought the future had them in mind. Small tragedies reported in a language of tidiness. Then a column headlined local bride lost in tragic accident. The article was polite and fragile as pressed flowers. No mention of a body. No mention of a baby. No mention of the weather, though later stories would insist the night had been clear or storming, depending on who needed which truth to stand. Mark tapped the glass. You'll find another clipping a week later about the family moving away. Happens often when towns want to stay the same. Elena felt a prickle between her shoulder blades, as if someone had breathed on her neck. She told herself it was the hum of the machine, the closeness of the stacks. You believe in her? She asked. I believe in what people owe, Mark said, rolling the film forward. Sometimes debts return with interest. Elena met Lucy at 3. They didn't go to the bar with the broken jukebox. They sat in Lucy's old sedan and watched the laundromat's windows revolve with wet sheets like pale bodies turning in sleep. I had a sister, Elena said before she could stop herself. She drowned. It wasn't here. It wasn't like this. But it was a river. Lucy stared at the steering wheel the way a person stares at something that has been a steering wheel, and also a confession booth. You feel it then, she said. That pull, like water has hands. Elena nodded, because that was exactly it. Water with hands, with patience, with a mouth that knew your name. A shadow moved in the laundromat. Henderson ducked in for a soda and out again. 2 kids pushed a change machine and laughed when it didn't give. Lucy checked her phone. I need to get my kid from my sister's. She's off Crawford Road. Do not go out there after dark, okay? Sheriff says the bridge is safe if you use the sidewalks. He's a liar. Promise me? I promise, Elena said, and meant it in the fragile way promises mean anything when curiosity and guilt share a body. They agreed to meet the next morning. Elena watched Lucy's sedan pull into traffic, signal left, disappear behind a sycamore that had been struck by lightning and lived anyway. Elena returned to the motel at dusk, head full of voices and contradictions. She spread her notes across the bed again, circled town hall fire, underlined ledger. When she looked up, the room had dimmed without her permission. She showered to wash the day off and to prove to herself that water could be ordinary. The motel's pipes coughed and relented. Steam softened the mirror, until her face became a suggestion. She stepped out, barefoot, chilled at the ankles. Her shoes sat neatly where she had left them by the door. Only now, mud ringed their soles and dampened their laces, the particular gray-brown slurry of riverbank silt. She touched one with a fingertip. It came away wet. Elena stared, mind riffling frantically through explanations. A leak under the door? A housekeeping error? A prank? But the mud held the geometry smears, like the memory of reeds, grit with flecks of mica that winked like eyes. From somewhere in the wall, the pipes moaned. Or a woman did. The neon sign fluttered. Open 24 hours. OPE 24 Who. Up. Elena picked up the recorder with hands that shook. Test, she said, voice ragged. This is Elena Carter, room 12. It's... She checked the time and found, without knowing how, that 2 hours were missing. A blank place where her pencil should have skittered over paper, where coffee should have cooled half drunk, where the sun should have finished dying. She lifted one shoe to the light. A small thing clung to the seam near the heel. A white filament, thin as a breath and stubborn as a memory. Not thread, not fishing line. A hair, veil fine. She set the shoe down with the care you give explosives and opened the door to the walkway. The night outside was streetlight quiet, cicadas, the hum of electric signs carrying out their sentence. A few doors down, the motel clerk's door stood ajar, television light pulsing blue in a dark room. Hello? Elena called. Mister? No answer. She stood a moment longer and, for reasons she could not articulate even to herself, closed her own door and slid the chain into place. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't look. She typed "Who is this?" and sent it. 3 dots bloomed, vanished, bloomed again, as if the sender had to remember how to form words on a dry land. No reply came. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, shoes drying slowly, like a confession soaking into fabric. She listened for the sound of someone walking past her door. None came. She listened for the river. It was too far. She listened for her sister. From the window, someone knocked 3 soft, careful taps, like a prayer learning its own body. Elena didn't move. The taps came again, each a colder note than the last. Lucy? She called, knowing it wasn't. Silence swelled. Then, from outside in the parking lot, a woman's voice rose bright and ordinary, calling a name Elena had not heard before. Maya. Honey, where are you? It was the motel clerk's wife. Elena realized the woman she'd glimpsed yesterday in a floral housecoat. The voice moved from car to car, corridor to corridor, growing sharper with fear. Maya. Elena stood, half ready to open the door, half frozen by the knowledge that sometimes a call in the night is only a lure. The voice thinned, receded, and then, just when Elena thought she had imagined it, cracked into a scream that cut off mid-breath, like a line dragged taut and snapped. The neon sign went dark. Elena's room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls had decided to take a step closer to her. She picked up her recorder. She said, "I'm coming," and didn't know whether she meant to the door or to the river. The sheriff's office was 2 rooms stitched together by the smell of burnt coffee and paperwork. Elena sat across from Sheriff Henderson, at a desk scarred by years of elbows and ashtrays. He wore his badge like a borrowed shirt, shoulders slumped, belly pressing against the buttons. His voice was steady, but there was something too practiced in the way he told the story. Bride drowned here in 1911, he said, sipping from a chipped mug. Carriage wheel slipped, took her into the river. Husband jumped in, never came back up. End of story. That bridge don't need more ghosts than traffic gives it. Elena leaned forward. Except there's no record of a body, no obituary for the husband. And every person I've spoken to insists she still walks the bridge. Henderson's eyes flicked to the window, then back. People need something to explain bad luck, Best not defeat it. You go poking around too much, you'll start seeing her too. The way he said too carried a private weight. Elena circled the word in her notebook. Fog was already coiling by the time Elena parked near the tree line. The bridge rose ahead, an iron skeleton, paint eaten to rust, rails bending like tired arms over the black water. A plaque bolted at the entrance, read in memory of Clara Weston, 1911, though the letters had been scraped thin by time and weather. Elena steadied her recorder. August 14th, 7:52 p.m. This is Elena Carter. Standing at the Hollows Bend Bridge, locals call it the Bride's Bridge. Sheriff insists it was an accident. Evidence suggests otherwise. Attempting to capture ambient sound. Her voice wavered despite her attempt at control. The air shifted as she walked out onto the planks. Each step creaked. Beneath, the river breathed, sluggish but deep, carrying the weight of centuries. She placed the recorder on the railing and leaned into the dark. For a moment, she thought she saw her own reflection in the water. Then it blinked. Her chest clenched. She pulled back. The recorder crackled. At first static, then the same layering of voices she had heard in her motel room. They weren't random. They built in rhythm, overlapping, urgent. Words tugged loose. Elena, come closer. She snatched up the recorder, breath trembling. A gust of wind surged down the river, and with it, a smell, not just damp, but rot, like flowers left too long on graves. And then bang. The planks behind her rattled, as if a heavy step had landed. Elena spun, heart racing. No one there. She tried to leave, but her feet felt caught, as if the wood itself held her in place. Something bumped against the railing below. She forced herself to look. A cluster of white flowers floated by roses, their petals sallow with decay, stems knotted together with what looked like bridal lace. They drifted against the current, circling back toward the bridge as though tethered. Her instincts screamed, "Don't touch." Yet her hand reached down, as if pulled by a current of its own. The bouquet brushed the pier post and lodged. She leaned closer, fingertips brushing damp petals. A hand shot up from the water and clamped her wrist. It was pale, bloated, nails cracked, veins blue beneath the skin. The grip was icy, impossibly strong. Elena screamed and yanked back, but the hand dragged harder, pulling her toward the rail. She twisted, desperate, digging nails into the wood until splinters tore her skin. Her voice broke into a plea. "Stop, please." And then, just as suddenly, the hand let go. She stumbled backward onto the planks, clutching her wrist. Red welts already bloomed around it, finger-shaped bruises. The bouquet sank without a ripple. "Elena!" She whipped around. Mark, the historian, ran onto the bridge, flashlight beams slicing the fog. His face was pale. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, voice tight. "She doesn't like strangers." Elena swallowed hard. "Who Clara?" Mark lowered his voice. "That's the name the town gave her. But she isn't Clara anymore. She's something else. And if she touched you—" He looked at her wrist and stopped. His silence was confirmation enough. "Why me?" Elena demanded. "Why now?" Mark hesitated. "She doesn't come for everyone. Only the guilty." The word cut deep, finding its target. Elena thought of water, metal, her sister's last desperate hands. She looked down at her wrist, at the ghost's fingerprints etched in red, and said nothing. The fog thickened until even Mark's flashlight looked muted. Somewhere below, water lapped against stone in slow, measured gulps. Elena thought she heard bells distant, tinny, like a music box turning underwater. She pulled her wrist close, wrapping her sleeve tight as though to hide the proof. "Let's go," Mark urged. "She's awake now." Elena followed him off the bridge, each step heavy, as though the planks had memorized her weight and mourned its loss. When she turned for one last look, she swore she saw her own silhouette still standing at the center of the span, head bowed, dress white in the fog. Elena held her wrist under the tap in Mark's kitchen, while the faucet coughed up thread-thin water, and then, grudgingly, a steady stream. The bruise prints the shape of fingers rose darker under the cold. It hurt enough to prove memory had a body. Mark's house was the kind that collected books the way trees collect leaves on shelves, on chairs stacked beside the coffee maker. The place smelled of paper and the lemon cleaner someone used once and then forgot to use again. A kettle steamed on the stove. Mark moved with quiet, efficient care, like a person who had learned that sudden motions woke things. "She grabbed you," he said, not asking. Elena nodded. Something did. He poured hot water into 2 mugs, dropped tea bags in like talismans. "It'll get worse now. She knows your name." She said it. Elena surprised herself by saying the next part out loud. "Like she knew me before I got here." Mark set the mug in front of her and sat. "Maybe she knows what you brought with you." Elena wrapped both hands around the heat. She had told almost no one about the river from years ago, the one that took her sister, because Elena's hands had been too slow, or too slippery, or too stubborn to accept help when it was offered. Guilt calcifies into a language of ifs. If we had taken another road, if she had driven, if I had not, the kettle clicked off. Silence pressed in. "Why are you helping me?" Elena asked. "You barely know me." Mark's jaw worked around a truth he didn't want to say. "Because people who go looking at the bridge don't usually come back with marks." He glanced at her wrist. "They don't come back much at all." A breath that might have been a laugh tried and failed in Elena's throat. "Comforting." He smiled without humor. "This town teaches you to be careful with comfort." Mark cleared a spot on the dining table by lifting a stack of photocopies and a ledger wrapped in waxy brown paper. He laid them out like offerings, newspaper clippings, a map of the river's old course before the flood control project in the 1960s, a black and white photograph of a wedding party squinting into sunlight. The bride's dress shone white even in grayscale. Her smile was small, as if she wasn't entirely convinced she'd earned it. "Clara Weston," Mark said, tapping the photo. "People say she went over in a carriage. But here," he slid over a second clipping, dated 2 days before the accident. "Town hall discussion continues over bridge repairs. Loose planks, rust, budget arguments. If a wheel slipped, it wasn't weather, it was neglect." "Neglect can be murder," Elena said. He met her eyes, pleased she'd said it first. "Or a cover for it." Elena traced her finger along the edges of the wedding picture. Something caught under her nail. The paper wasn't smooth. She tilted it to the light. A faint, circular stain darkened one corner like a ring left by a glass. But it was too perfect and too pale for coffee or tea. It looked like water had sat there and considered its options. "You have more?" she asked. "Boxes," he said, "but the rest is in the church archive. Pastor Lillian keeps it. She's protective. After the town hall fire in 28, she took whatever survived." Elena looked up. The fire. Records gone. With them, names that should have stayed. People here like forgetting to have a reason. "Will she let us see?" "If I ask," he said, sounding tentative. "If you promise not to print what you find until we know what it is." Elena should have said she couldn't promise a thing like that. But the handprint on her wrist ached like a leaden bracelet, and promises are sometimes just things people say to make a path where none exists. "I promise." Her phone vibrated on the table, jittering against the wood with insect insistence. Unknown number. Elena answered with a professional, "This is Elena," intending to hang up if it was the sheriff or a tipster who wanted to trade folklore for $50. Only water answered soft at first, then louder, as if the speaker had been submerged and was rising toward the air. Behind it, A slow, gurgling breath. A mouth learning to breathe wrong. "Hello?" Elena said. "Who is this?" The breath came close to the microphone. Then a voice barely threaded through the wet. "You should have saved me." Elena's throat closed. She disconnected with a clumsy swipe and put the phone face down as if it could see her. "Spam?" Mark asked carefully. "Wrong number," she said, and hated how the lie sounded tired, like shoes worn one day too long. Mark watched her with a look that wasn't pity. He seemed allergic to pity, but something adjacent. Respect for a person dragging something heavy up a hill, maybe. "It doesn't always speak with your voice," he said softly. "Sometimes it borrows another." "My sister is dead," Elena said, the sentence hitting the air with a flat, undeniable sound. "And this thing knows the shape of that wound." He didn't ask for details. She didn't offer them. But she touched her wrist absently, gripping at the ache, and whispered the things she had never said in a clear voice. Daylight demands. "I was driving." Mark closed the ledger, not to end the conversation, but to keep it from witnessing. Elena walked to the bathroom with the mug in her hand, needing water she could control. The mirror was spotted with age. Silver backing had gone to foxing around the edges, where time likes to eat first. Steam from the tea blurred her face until it looked kind, then thinner, then others. She set the mug down and ran the tap, splashing her wrists. The bruise flared. She closed her eyes and counted backward from 10, the way a therapist once taught her when sleep was an enemy and time refused to pass. When she looked up, her own face peered back. Then it didn't. The woman in the glass wore Elena's hair, but not her expression. The mouth was too calm. The eyes were milk white, without iris or mercy. A veil's edge grazed the shoulder and dripped, as if gravity in the mirror worked in a separate direction. Elena did not turn around. She couldn't bear to test whether the not her in the glass had a body in the room. She lifted her hand. The woman lifted hers in a beat too late, mimicry with a lag only a dead thing would accept. Water slid from the mirror Elena's palm, though Elena's own hand was dry. The vein-thin voice slid into the bathroom, like fog under a door. "Don't look," it murmured, not warning, but command. And for a relief-hurt second, Elena thought the message on her phone had come from this compassion. She swallowed. "What do you want?" Her reflection didn't answer. Behind it, past her shoulder in the glass, a fragment of white moved, the suggestion of a dress at the edge of a frame. A bouquet wilted in a hand that should not have been able to hold. Elena turned then, violently, braced for cold. The bathroom was empty. Water ran and fell obediently into the sink. When she looked back at the mirror, it was only a mirror again. Only a face pinched by fright and a bruise darkening like evening. She shut off the tap, grabbed a towel, and left the light on behind her. They drove to the church as the sun sagged toward the horizon and clouds built around it like scaffolding. Pastor Lillian met them at the side entrance with a ring of keys and the tired half-smile of a person whose grief and work shared the same chair. "I don't release records without knowing why," she said, a greeting and a challenge. "We're trying to find truth," Mark said. "Not a headline." Pastor Lillian studied Elena's face with an unsettling softness. "Some people look at you and tally features." She looked and weighed consequences. "You saw her." Elena didn't say yes. The pastor didn't need it. She led them downstairs into a basement that smelled of old wood and starch. Metal cabinets lined the walls. Lillian selected a key and opened one. Inside, ledgers swollen with humidity, bundles of papers tied with twine, a box of photograph negatives like tiny windows to a brighter decade. "After the hall fire," Lillian said, "my father rescued what he could. People called it hoarding. He called it penance." "For what?" Elena asked. "For choosing quiet when a louder truth was required." She slid a leather-bound book onto the table. Towns like ours are built on decisions to look away. That's why she walks. Not because of a fall, because of the looking away. The ledger creaked when Lillian opened it. Names, dates, marriage licenses, baptismal notes in careful penmanship, receipts for donations you could buy a conscience with. Mark's finger tracked columns with the instinct of a man who had done this too often. Here, he said, the week of the accident. Lillian leaned in. The entry for Weston, Clara, had been written, then lightly scraped by a blade until the ink thinned, then overwritten with something innocuous. A note about choir robes and a receipt for hymnals. The palimpsest effect left a bruise of letters beneath the new words. Special license. Objections filed. Someone didn't want this to read clean, Mark murmured. Or they wanted it to read too clean, Lillian said. People forget. To erase a thing, well, you must know its shape too well. A drop darkened the edge of the page. Elena flinched, expecting water, but it was only the pastor's shadow passing, cold as a tide. May I photograph? Elena asked. No, Lillian said, too quickly. Then softer. Not yet. I'll give you copies. I need you to swear you'll return the book tomorrow. People think ghosts only want revenge. Sometimes they want stewardship. Elena nodded. I'll bring it back. She paused. Pastor, did you ever see her? Lillian's smile didn't change. Her eyes did. I baptized a girl by the river once, she said, because the child's grandmother insisted the water had to know her name if it was going to take it someday. She closed the ledger gently. I don't go to the bridge after dark. Outside the church, evening was already rehearsing for night. Alana's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She didn't answer this time. The voicemail icon bloomed. She let it. Mark leaned on the hood of his car like a person anchoring himself by having something solid at his back. There are rules, he said, eyes on the church steps. They're not written anywhere, but people follow them because they don't want to learn them the hard way. Tell me, don't look too long, he said. Don't say her name at the bridge. Don't go if the fog sits low enough to touch your knees. If you hear bells, leave. If you hear your name from the water, you are already too close. Elena waited. And if she touches you, he said, voice lowering as if the street might hear, don't go to sleep. She comes back when you're defenseless. Elena smiled without amusement. So, don't look, don't listen, don't speak, don't sleep. It keeps you alive. She thought of the mirror lag, the bouquet hand, the bruise singing under her skin. Alive isn't the same as safe. No, Mark said. Not here. She returned to the motel with the ledger wrapped in a towel, the way you carry a newborn or a bomb. The clerk's window glowed with the blue wash of television. His door stood open a careful 2 inches, exactly as before. Elena thought of the scream from last night, cut off like a wire. In her room, she set the book on the desk and sat on the bed with the phone in her hand. She played the voicemail because not playing it would be worse. The recording began with silence. Then a single knock echoed from far away. Water noises layered in, slow laps, a wet fabric shifting. At the edge of the microphone, someone breathed through a throat full of river. The voice arrived as if it had traveled a long distance under stone. Elena, it said, in a tone that surprised her by its gentleness. You promised. She didn't remember promising anything to the dead. The message ended. The phone screen went black with a soft, satisfied click. Elena stood, crossed to the desk, and opened the ledger to the page already thin with erasure. In the margin, beside the scraped-out entry, lifted by the lamplight at a certain angle, the impression of a second note hid beneath the rewritten ink. She tilted the page until the indent resolved into words. Paid in full. Her mouth went dry. Paid for what? A bride. A silence. A river given an assignment it could not refuse. From the window, 3 soft knocks answered the question she had not yet found the courage to ask. She did not go to the curtain. She picked up the ledger, and for the first time since arriving in Hollow's Bend, prayed. The ledger lay open on Elena's motel desk, the words paid in full, whispering against the page in lamplight. She hadn't slept Mark's warning about sleep, circled her thoughts like a moth trapped against glass. By morning, the bruises on her wrist had bloomed to a sickly violet. She traced the finger marks with a pen, as if recording evidence would anchor them in reality. Evidence meant story. Story meant control. But the deeper she chased the facts, the more she felt like the ghost was the one writing her. A knock at her door jolted her upright. Not the patient 3-tap rhythm from the night before. This was hurried, human. "Ms. Carter?" A voice called. "It's Pastor Lillian." Elena unchained the door. The pastor stood with her hands clasped tight around a folded paper. She looked smaller in daylight, her clerical collar crooked as though she had dressed too quickly. "I shouldn't have let you take that book," Lillian said without preamble, "but I think maybe you're meant to see this." She handed Elena the paper. It was a faded copy of a town council meeting minutes, dated a week before Clara Weston's supposed accident. The words were smudged, but one line cut clear. Concerns raised regarding Weston family objections. Resolution: matters settled privately. Lillian's face was grave. Settled privately usually meant someone was paid to shut their mouth or to leave town. And if they didn't take the money? Elena asked. Then the town found another way. The pastor's voice dropped, and Elena understood. The ghost wasn't just haunting. It was testifying. Elena needed more voices, more testimony. She walked to the barber shop, bell jingling over the door. The shop smelled of shaving cream and cedar oil. Mr. Stiles, the barber, looked up from sweeping. His eyes narrowed. "You've been asking too many questions," he said. Elena sat in the chair opposite him. "That's my job." "That's how people disappear?" Her skin prickled. "Disappear how?" He set down the broom, leaned on it like a weapon. "You think it's just the bride? It's not. It's the whole town. Our grandfathers signed papers they shouldn't have, paid for silence. And now she walks to remind us what's owed." "Paid for what?" Elena pressed. Stiles's jaw worked. His voice dropped low. "She wasn't an accident." "She was." The door opened. A gust of air carried in dust and the smell of motor oil. Sheriff Henderson stepped inside. "Stiles," he said flatly. "Break time's over." The barber froze. Henderson's eyes cut to Elena, cool and sharp. "Ms. Carter, you're welcome here as a guest. Guests behave. They don't stir up graves, better left alone." Elena left before Henderson could say more. The unfinished word was sticking in her ribs like a bone. That night, Elena returned to her motel. The clerk's door was shut tight now. No blue glow, no sliver of television light. The hallway felt too empty. Inside her room, the air was damp, heavy with a smell she recognized too well. River water. She followed it to the bathroom. Her stomach turned. In the bathtub sat Mr. Stiles, the barber, slumped upright against the tiles. His skin was gray-blue, lips parted as if mid-word. A bridal veil torn, waterlogged, was wrapped tightly around his throat. The tap dripped steadily, each drop echoing in the silence. His eyes were open. Elena staggered back, gagging. Her recorder clattered from her hand, landed against the tiles, and without her touching it clicked on. Static bled out, then whispers. Not Stiles's voice. Not hers. A chorus overlapping. "Don't look. Don't speak. Don't tell." Her legs nearly gave way. She yanked the recorder off the floor and bolted. Mark met her in the library after she called, voice raw and trembling. He locked the doors behind them, led her into the basement archives. "You said it would get worse if she touched me," Elena said. "You didn't say people would die." Mark ran a hand through his hair, face drawn. I didn't want to believe it still happened. Not after, he trailed off. After what? He hesitated then. My mother. She saw the woman when I was a boy. 2 weeks later, she drowned herself in the river. People said depression. I know better. The ghost doesn't just haunt. She uses guilt like a hook. The more you fight it, the deeper it sets. Elena's breath shook. She killed Stiles. Mark shook his head. No, Stiles knew too much. The town lets her do their work for them. She's not just a ghost, they've turned her into a weapon. Anyone who talks, anyone who remembers, gets pulled under. That's the deal. Elena's hand went to her wrist, the bruises still tender. And what happens if I don't stop asking questions? Mark's eyes were dark. Then you'll be the next name they erase. Back in her motel room, Elena found the tub scrubbed clean. No body, no veil. Only a faint dampness clung to the tiles, as if someone had drained the river straight through the bathroom. On the desk, the ledger sat open again, though she had left it closed. A new line of text now etched beneath paid in full, written in wet, trembling letters. Next payment due. Elena slammed the book shut, heart hammering. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just a haunting. It was a debt that the town had been paying with lives for generations. And she was on the ledger. Elena did not sleep. She tried to keep vigil with coffee that tasted like burnt paper and the ledger open beside the motel lamp. The page where next payment due had appeared now showed only the pastor's tidy hand and the scrape-fin entry about choir robes. If she tilted the paper to the light, she half saw the wet letters again, like a bruise aging to yellow. She signed her name on a sticky note and left it tucked in the book's gutter. Proof she had touched this, if touch alone still meant anything. At 2:13 a, her phone vibrated on the knitstand. An unknown number again. She didn't answer, but a voicemail arrived without a ring, as if the call had bypassed sound the way fish bypass doors. She pressed play. At first, river. Then the small, wet sound of a veil being wrung out by patient hands. Then her own voice, her exact voice saying, with careful politeness, "Pastor, it's Elena. I'm sorry I took the ledger without permission. I'll leave it on the church steps before sunrise." Elena sat up so fast the lamp rattled. "I didn't call her," she said aloud, to the room, to the book, to anyone. Her throat felt like she had swallowed cold. She dialed Pastor Lillian immediately. It rang and rang. Voicemail. Elena stammered out a contradictory message. "Keep the doors locked. I'm not coming. If someone knocks, it isn't me," and hung up knowing how unhinged it would sound in daylight. The neon outside ticked. Open 24 hours. OPE 24 who? The sign stuttered like a bad heart. Don't sleep, she told herself. Mark's rule. Don't look. Don't listen. Don't speak. Don't. Her eyelids slid down without asking permission. She woke standing. Cold air coned through her hair. Wet reeds brushed her ankles. The fog along the riverbank made the world a smaller room. Somewhere behind her, a car door groaned shut, familiar metal teeth meeting in a bite. Her car. Her keys dug into her palm, imprinting their shape in her skin as if to prove they had been there a long time. The bridge rose ahead, dark, patient. The ledger lay open on the railing, a white rectangle waiting to be signed. No, she said, but it came out in a voice that wasn't quite hers, thicker, slower, as if words had to be pulled through water first. She became aware of two facts at once. Her shoes were slick with mud, and her mouth tasted like river. She spat. A thread of something pale hung from her lower lip, clung, and fell. A veil-fine filament. Hair. Elena staggered back, and her heel nudged something soft. A small shape lay just off the path, dark against the grass. A dog, the kind with a collar engraved with a heart and a name. It didn't belong to Lucy. Lucy had said she couldn't have pets at her sister's, but the tag read Emma the egg. Elena's stomach turned so violently she had to swallow twice to keep the night where it belonged. The dog's fur lay flat in the wrong direction. Water had patted it that way. The mouth was open as if to bark. No sound came. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered to a creature that couldn't hear apologies. Her breath made little clouds. "Paid in full," the ledger whispered without moving. Then beneath it, an invisible hand pressed new words into the paper from under the page, the way a child writes too hard and dents the sheet below. Elena bent to the text and saw, with the painful clarity of a wrong note in a hymn, her own name being formed. Carter, Elena. "Stop," she said. The ledger kept writing, as if told by a river. She closed the book and hugged it to her chest, the way some people hold babies and others hold bombs. She slid behind the wheel and drove without remembering how to reverse, how to signal, how to keep the car between the lines. Fog moaned under the tires. When the motel's O flickered alive out of the night, she felt a blind, childish gratitude for vowels. She parked, crooked. She left the ledger on the passenger seat, like a sleeping animal she didn't want to wake. Lucy stood outside Elena's door, cardigan pulled tight against the cold, hair up in a messy knot. Her eyes moved over Elena's face like a mechanic assessing the shape of a damaged hood. "You answered my text," Lucy said. "I didn't think you would." Elena fumbled for her phone. The last message from Lucy, "You okay?" had a reply she did not remember sending. "Don't look." "I didn't," Elena started, stopped. "Thank you for coming." Lucy's gaze snagged on Elena's shoes. "Is that?" "Elena," Lucy said to herself, as if testing whether the name still fit the person wearing it. "Come inside. Wash your hands. Hot water helps. They hate heat." "They?" Lucy's mouth worked around words as if they resisted shapes made of air. "She's meaner when she's cold." Inside, Lucy filled the motel room with the smell of cheap peppermint lotion and a competence that felt like grace. She boiled water in the dented electric kettle Elena had rescued from the front desk. She wrapped a towel around Elena's hands and sat her down. "I've told myself for years if I ever saw her again, I'd keep my eyes closed," Lucy said. "Eyes open make a door in your head. They walk through." Elena swallowed. "Did you see her before?" Lucy showed her wrist. A scar like a pale bracelet shone where skin had healed badly. 6 years ago, after Maya was born. "I used to pace the bridge with her at night when she wouldn't sleep. One foggy morning, I looked too long. Put your finger in a lake, and it will introduce the rest of you to itself." She tugged her sleeve back down. "I promised myself I wouldn't look again. When you texted, when I thought it was you, my promise broke a little." Elena closed her eyes. "It wasn't me." "I know," Lucy said, and the certainty of her voice was the kind of mercy that made lungs work again. "But she thought I should come anyway." "The ledger," Elena began. "She wrote my name." Lucy's expression shifted in the most devastating way. She calculated childcare, shifts at the diner, what might be bartered for safety. "Take it back," she said, "by daylight. Things written at night have more teeth." They drove to the church as dawn unraveled gray from the horizon. The town felt held breath still. Pastor Lillian's car sat at the curb. The church door stood unlocked, as if someone had been called from sleep and opened it in their nightgown. Inside, the nave was dim and smelled of wax. The ledger belonged to the basement, but Elena carried it to the front pew because she wanted something sacred near it. A voice rose from the side aisle. "Morning, Miss Carter." Sheriff Henderson. He stepped into the low light, hand resting easy on his belt, eyes not easy at all. "Pastor's not here. You can leave that with me." Elena hugged the ledger tighter. Lucy's hand brushed Elena's elbow once, the faintest alert. "I promised her," Elena said. And I promised the town, Henderson said softly. He nodded toward the altar rail. Way I see it, we all keep our promises today. Behind him, two men Elena recognized from the council photo in the diner holder now, faces carved into serious lines, stood with their Sunday coats buttoned low. They looked less like men and more like anyone who has decided their fear justifies everything after it. Henderson stepped forward, palm out like a man soothing a horse. That book has caused problems for 100 years. People think it owes them the truth. Truth don't feed children, Miss Carter. Peace does. Peace built on drowning, Elena said. He smiled without moving his mouth. We use the language we have. So did our fathers. You settled it privately, Elena said. You're still settling it. Henderson's eyes flicked once to Lucy, an acknowledgement of a witness he did not appreciate. He lowered his voice. Take your friend home. Get on that bus. Write about pie and parades. Leave the rest to the river. Elena felt the ledger pulse against her ribs. Rationality, which had been her spine for years, flexed and snapped back into place. No, she said. The men shifted. Henderson's hand twitched not toward his gun, but toward the church door. Possessive, like a man protecting a ledger of names he could not afford to have read. From the narthex, a third figure appeared. Pastor Lillian, hair uncombed, cardigan inside out. She held nothing but keys, which looked as pitiful as good intentions in a flood. Leave them alone, she said calmly, as if telling a dog not to beg. Henderson's lips pressed thin. We're trying to prevent panic. You're trying to prevent confession, Lillian said. There's a difference. Silence expanded. The rules don't look, don't listen, don't speak, don't sleep did not include church. Elena wished one of them did. The pastor stepped between Henderson and Elena. Go, she whispered without turning. Use the back. To Henderson louder. You want the book? You asked me in daylight with the council present. Daylight's when people think they're safe, he said. They say things they regret. They say things they should have said 100 years ago, Lillian replied. Elena and Lucy slipped toward the sacristy and out the narrow door that smelled of incense and cleaning fluid. They did not run. Running wakes predators. Back in the car, Elena's hands shook so badly she could barely put the key in the ignition. Lucy rested one hand on the wheel to still it. You can't go to your room, she said. They'll wait there. And she prefers me asleep, Elena said. I won't give her that. They went to Mark's house instead. He opened the door with relief that complicated his features. Relief that had to acknowledge expectation. He had already feared the opposite outcome. You look like a person dragged through a river backwards, he said plainly, and stepped aside. Elena set the ledger on the table. She's writing names. Mine. Others. We're out of time, Mark said. He laid out copies of clippings on the table as if cards in a losing game. If the story is what I think, it goes like this. Clara wasn't an accident. She was pregnant by someone with a last name powerful enough to erase ink. When her family objected, some men decided to invent an accident. The river received a woman and a lie. Since then, the river collects interest. Elena heard herself say, Clara, and the name tasted like iron on her tongue. Her voice shifted mid-syllable to a breathier register. Both men froze. Say that again, Mark said carefully. Elena opened her mouth. Another voice came out. Not a mimicry now. Elena was driving, it said, too gently, and Elena slapped her own lips with her palm hard enough to sting. Get it out, Lucy said, not unkindly. Spit, scream, make a noise that belongs to you. Elena bent over the sink and coughed until bile burned her throat. What came up was only spit and a single long hair, bridal fine, which clung to the drain like a signature. She turned the tap to hot and left it there until steam filled the small kitchen and her skin felt her own again. Water is not always an enemy. Sometimes it obeys. When she straightened, Mark had moved the ledger to a different chair. He had not touched it. He had used a cutting board to slide it as if it could bite. "We end this on the bridge," he said. "Tonight?" Lucy asked, disbelief and awe at war in her voice. "It's where she is strongest," Mark said, "which is also where she is most visible. The town can't deny what it sees. Lillian will stand with us. Others might. We bring the ledger and the names. We say them out loud and refuse the river a private language." Elena stared at the ledger. The book lay quiet, but in her mind it throbbed like a pulse. "Should try to use my mouth," Elena said. "Then we anchor you to ours," Mark replied. "You hold Lucy's hand. You hold mine. You look only at us. If bells ring, we go. If the fog climbs your knees, we go. We make rules and we obey them." Elena nodded, because nodding made a path forward appear on the floorboards. She took a pen and wrote a sentence on an index card in block letters, then taped it to the ledger's cover. "I am not your voice." Lucy looked at the note and exhaled through a laugh that had reasons. "Write another," she said, "for yourself." Elena wrote, "I was driving. I am living." The words were not absolution. They were scaffolding. They agreed to meet Pastor Lillian at the church at sundown. Lucy went to pick up her daughter. Mark fetched battery lanterns, rope, towels, and the kind of optimism that looks like stubbornness after midnight. Elena returned to the motel for the last time, to collect the recorder and a jacket that still remembered her shape. In the room's mirror, her face looked like a person who had been awake too long and asked the wrong questions. The silver backing had foxed further since yesterday. Little continents of decay mapped new borders around her. The phone vibrated on the counter. Unknown number. Elena let it go to voicemail. Immediately, the message icon bloomed. She played it and heard clear as a confession her own voice. "Mark, it's me. Meet me at the bridge early. Come alone. Bring the book." The ghost had learned to use her mouth for invitations. Elena didn't panic. Panic wastes oxygen. She dialed Mark, voice clipped. "Don't answer any messages from me unless you hear me say our rule." "What rule?" "That I was driving and I am living," she said. "Say it back." He did. Steady. "Good," she said. "I'll see you at the church first. With people. With light." When she hung up, she allowed herself one small tremor. The neon sign outside sputtered and steadied. Open 24 hours. A promise and a threat. 3 soft knocks sounded at the window. Elena turned toward the glass and did not look. "I am not your voice," she whispered to a presence that had borrowed her too many times. "Find another mouth." Silence answered. Then, faint and far like bells through fog, the river laughed. Elena picked up the ledger, the recorder, and the index card with her stubborn sentence. She stepped into the hall, closed the door gently, and did not glance back to see whether anyone bride, sheriff, or her own reflection stood in the room she left. She headed for the church, for the rules, for the floodlit span of the bridge where the town would have to watch. The church bells tolled 7 as Elena and Mark carried lanterns down to the bridge. Lucy followed, her daughter asleep against her shoulder in a sling. Pastor Lillian walking just ahead with the deliberate calm of someone who had faced storms before and knew that steady steps mattered more than speed. The town gathered in pockets of shadow along the road. Some curious, some hostile, most silent. Word had spread that the reporter was going to test the curse. Henderson's cruiser idled at the edge of the lot, headlights off, sheriff visible only as a silhouette smoking against the glow of his dash. The bridge itself breathed fog. The rails dripped with condensation. The planks looked darker than wood should look, as if stained with a century of footsteps leading nowhere. Elena pressed her index card between her palms. "I was driving. I am living." She repeated it like prayer. she would need it. Pastor Lillian raised her voice. The town has kept silence for too long. Silence feeds her. Tonight, we read the names. Mark set the ledger on the railing, careful not to touch it barehanded. The book opened on its own, fluttering until it landed at the 1911 entries. The ink seemed wet again. The crowd stirred uneasily. Someone muttered blasphemy. Another, don't provoke her. But others stepped forward faces Elena had seen at the diner, the library, the barber shop. People who had lost family and never received a body back. People who had seen things and been told to shut their eyes. Mark's hand trembled, but his voice held. Clara Weston, the bride. The first name that was buried wrong. The fog shifted. Lantern light guttered, though no wind touched them. A sound rose from below bells, faint and irregular, like a wedding procession underwater. Lucy squeezed Elena's hand. Don't look, she whispered. The fog coalesced at the center of the span. White fabric surfaced from the mist, shape forming around it. A woman in a long gown, veil heavy with river silt, face hidden behind pale dripping lace. She was taller than any bride should be, her head brushing the rails, her limbs bending wrong, too many joints suggested under the cloth. Water poured constantly from her hands, as though her body could not stop draining. A hiss traveled through the crowd, fear, prayer, disbelief. Henderson flicked his cigarette into the river, but did not move closer. Elena forced her eyes on Mark. His lips moved around the rules. Don't look. Don't listen. Don't speak. He raised the next name. Jonah Weston, he said. The husband who jumped. Or was pushed. The ghost's veil twitched. A groan, long and low, rolled over the bridge like wood about to splinter. The lantern nearest Elena shattered, glass bursting outward as if something had screamed from inside it. The flame snuffed. Elena felt her mouth opening, unbidden. Words rose from her chest in a voice wet and foreign. Elena was driving. She let her sister drown. No, she cried, gripping Lucy's hand tighter. That's my guilt, not yours to use. Her throat burned, but she forced her voice louder. I was driving. I am living. The ghost paused. For a flicker, the veil parted. Behind it, Elena saw her sister's face pale, lips blue, eyes wide with the panic of water. The sight punched breath out of her. Say the names, Lillian commanded. Names are confession. Confession is truth. Elena gasped. Thomas Halley, she blurted, recalling the council minutes. One of the men who signed the ledger. Mark followed. Samuel Griggs. Another signer. Another silence. Each name was a stone thrown into water. The ghost convulsed, veil rippling like a sail caught in gale. Bells rang louder, no longer faint, but clamoring as though a wedding were being forced through the night. The ghost surged. A hand of water lashed from beneath the planks, fingers clawing. It seized Mark's leg and yanked. No, Elena screamed, lunging, grabbing his arm. She pulled, nails biting into his jacket. For a moment, she thought she might win. Then the ledger flipped pages violently and slammed shut like jaws. Mark's body was dragged toward the railing. His eyes locked on Elena's. Finish it, he shouted. Don't stop. The river swallowed him mid-sentence. His flashlight spun once across the fog and went out. The crowd screamed. Some fled. Others froze. Henderson barked orders. No one followed. Elena collapsed to her knees, hands burning with splinters. The place where Mark had been was only water again, calm and smug. Lucy's voice pierced the chaos. Keep reading. Elena staggered up. The ghost loomed now fully formed, veil thrown back. Half the face was beautiful bride, lips rouged, hair dark as ink. The other half was wrought skin peeled away to reveal bone, jaw unhinged wide, water spilling endlessly from the mouth. She leaned close, so near, Elena felt spray on her cheeks. The ghost whispered, "Say your sister's name. Trade her for yours. Paid in full." Elena's voice trembled. Her name was Sarah. The ghost's eyes brightened with hunger. "But she doesn't belong to you," Elena said, steadier now. "Her death is mine to carry. Not the town's, not yours, mine." She opened the ledger. Pages dripped ink that blurred and bled. Names swam. She shouted them into the fog council members, families who profited, anyone the pastor had whispered from memory. Each name dragged the ghost's body in opposite directions, as if too many debts were being called at once. The dress shredded, lace whipping in a wind that wasn't wind. Voices howled, dozens overlapping. "Don't look, don't speak, don't tell." Elena forced her gaze on Lucy, who held her daughter close, face wet with terror and defiance. "I am living," Elena said, loud as she could. The ghost screamed high, metal sharp, a sound of water finding lungs. The bridge shook. Boards rattled, bolts shrieked. Lanterns exploded one by one until only Pastor Lillian's candle remained, flame steady despite the storm. Then silence. The ghost's form collapsed into mist, veil dissolving into nothing. The river surged once more and stilled. Elena looked down. The ledger lay open at her feet. A final line had written itself across the last page. Payment interrupted. Her hands shook as she closed it. Mark was gone. The crowd had scattered. Henderson's cruiser rolled slowly away, taillights vanishing into fog. Lucy touched her shoulder. "It's not over," she whispered. Elena nodded. "No, but she knows I won't trade." Behind them, the bridge groaned as if remembering a weight it could no longer hold. Bells echoed once, faint and mocking, before fading back into the river. The bridge exhaled fog long after the ghost dissolved. The crowd had broken apart like a frightened flock, scattering back into houses, shutting doors, drawing curtains. Henderson's cruiser vanished downriver, its taillights swallowed in mist. Only Elena, Lucy, Pastor Lillian, and the ledger remained. The silence was unbearable. The absence of Mark hung heavier than his presence ever had. Elena half expected him to surface, coughing river water, but the river's calm mocked her with its stillness. She closed the ledger. "It's not done." Pastor Lillian nodded. "No, payment interrupted means the debt still stands." Lucy shifted Maya higher against her shoulder. The child stirred, murmuring a dream syllable that sounded almost like a bell. Lucy's face pinched with fear. "We have to leave, all of us, before it decides who's next." They carried the book back to the church. Inside, the sanctuary smelled of smoke and wax. Lillian set the candle on the altar. Elena placed the ledger beside it. The book shivered. Pages fluttered, though no wind stirred. It opened on its own, ink bleeding fresh across the final page. The words wrote themselves in jagged script. Confession incomplete. Witnesses insufficient. Payment escalates. The candle guttered. The ledger snapped shut. Lillian made the sign of the cross. She's not just a ghost. She's become the town's ledger itself. As long as guilt exists unspoken, she'll keep collecting. Elena's throat tightened. "So how do we stop her?" "Expose everything," Lillian said. "No more private settlements. Every name, every silence, brought to light." Lucy's laugh cracked, brittle. "You think anyone will stand up after what happened to Mark?" Elena touched her bruised wrist. "If I run, she still follows. If I stay, maybe I can cut the cord." They carried the ledger out behind the church, the old fire pit where parishioners burned leaves every autumn. Elena placed the book in the ash and poured lighter fluid until the pages gleamed wet. Her hands trembled as she struck a match. "Truth isn't safe on paper here," she said. "It belongs in memory, spoken, witnessed." She dropped the flame. The ledger caught instantly. Ink hissed as if screaming. Names writhed in smoke. The smell was foul burnt lily, river rot, old perfume. Voices rose with the fire. Dozens overlapping, pleading, accusing. Lucy covered Maya's ears. Lillian murmured prayers. Elena stood still, the heat blistering her cheeks, refusing to flinch. Then a single voice broke through clear, sharp, familiar. Elena. Her sister's. Elena's knees weakened. The flames shifted, revealing a face in the smoke. Sarah's, as she had been in the river. Eyes wide, mouth open. Blame etched in every feature. You should have saved me. Elena's heart clenched. I know, she whispered. I didn't, and I will carry it. But you're not hers to keep. The smoke face twisted, shrieked, and blew apart. The fire flared high, then collapsed. Only charred ash remained. The voices stopped. For the first time since arriving in Hollow's Bend, the night was truly quiet. At dawn, Elena packed the recorder, her notebook, and little else. Lucy buckled Maya into the car seat, eyes red but dry. Pastor Lillian stood at the church steps, hands folded. You've cracked it open, the pastor said. Maybe it's enough, maybe not, but the town has seen. Elena hesitated. What if burning the book wasn't the end? Then the truth must live in you, Lillian said simply. Speak it everywhere. Starve her of silence. Elena nodded. She drove out of Hollow's Bend with Lucy behind her, the road stretching long and empty. For a few blessed miles, the fog did not follow. By late afternoon, she reached the interstate. Gas station, coffee, sun warm on her hands through the windshield. She almost believed she had left it behind. She adjusted the rearview mirror. For a second, the reflection was only herself tired, hollow-eyed, alive. Then the glass shifted. A figure sat in the back seat, white dress, veil draped across her lap, the face half beautiful, half rotted, smiling faintly. Elena's breath caught. She spun around. The back seat was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone, but the car smelled faintly of river water. And from the speaker, without her pressing play, her recorder clicked on. Static crackled. Then her own voice whispered, Next payment due.